Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Pranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Pranaya Karunya Kanaganatam Prapta Sakalyana Gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaro Vrindam Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Mahaprabhu ki Tananita Gita Vaditra Madhyam Manasura Sena Romanchakam Pasro Taranga Bajo Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Shri Vigrahara Dhananityanana Shringara Tanma Niramajanado Shri Vigrahara Juktasya bhaktamsya niyunjatopi Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Satana Truptan Hari Bhakta Shanga Chaturveda Shri Kridvaiva Truptin Bhajata Shadeva Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Shiradikama Tavayara Para Madhurya Leela Gunarupanamna Shiradikama Madhurya Pratikshana Dhanalopasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda. Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda. Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda. Ne kunja yuno ratikeli sidhai jajali bher joke apekshaniya. Tatrati daksha otivalavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam. Sakshat Haridena Shamasta Shashrin Ruktastathava Vyataeva Sadhavi Sakyadari. Kintu Prabharja Priya Eva Tasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda. Yasya Prasada Bhagavad Prasada Yasya Prasadam Nagati Kutapi. Yasya Dayam Stuvantasya Yasatri Sandam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam. Dayam Stuvantasya Yasatri Sandam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam. Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam. Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitina Mine Namah. Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunavadi Pachatari Shatarine. Namaste Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Nama, Krishna Jadavaye Nama, Jadavaye Madhavaye Keshavaye Nama, Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudan, Giridhari Gopina Madana Mohan, Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita, Hare Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita, Shri Rupa Sanatan Vataraguna, Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna, Shri Radha Nilamada Radha Nilamada Radhe, Nitai Gora Haribo, 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 Nitai Gora Haribo, Haribo.
Namamishwaram Sachid Anandarupam Lasat Kundalam Gokule Brajamanam Namamishwaram Sachid Anandarupam Lasat Kundalam Gokule Brajamanam Yashodabhiyolukhaladavamanam Paramvrishtam atyantadodrutya gopya Rudantamuhurnetra yugmam rijantam Karamboja yugmena satankanetram Muhushvashakam patrirentaka Stitam graivam damodaram bhaktivaddam Iti drikshvalilabhiranandakunde Swagoshamimajantam akyapayantam Tadiyeshi tadneshu bhaktirjitatvam पुनः प्रेमतस्तं शतावृत्ति वन्दे वरं देवमोक्षं न मोक्षवदिं वा न चान्यं वृणेऽहं वरेषदपीह इदं ते वपुर्नाथ गोपालबालं सदा मनश्यामि आश्रम किमन्ये इदं ते मुखाम्बोजम् अत्यन्तनीलैर्वृतं कुण्डलैस्निग्धरक्षैष गोप्या मुहुश्चुम्बितं बिम्बरक्तधरं मे मनशवि आश्रमालं लक्षलाभे नमो देवदामोदरानन्त विष्णु प्रसीद प्रभो दुःखजालभिमग्नम् कृपादृष्टिवृष्ट्या ते दीनं बतानु गृहाणि मामज्जामेदशि दृश्याय कुबेरात्मजौ भद्वमूर्तैव यद्वत् त्वया मोचितौ भक्तिभाजौ कृतौ च तथा प्रेम भक्तिं सकामि प्रयच्छ नमो शीघ्रहो मेऽस्ति दामोदरेय नमस्ते स्तुधाम्ने स्तुराधिपिधाम्ने त्वदीयोदराय विश्वस्य धाम्ने नमो राधिकायै त्वदीयप्रियायै नमो नन्तलीलाय देवाय तुभ्यम् नमो राधिकाय त्वदीयप्रियायै नमो नन्तलीलाय देवाय तुभ्यम् नमो राधिकायै त्वदीयप्रियायै नमो नन्तलीलाय देवाय तुभ्यम् नमो राधिकाय त्वदीयप्रियाय नमो नन्तलीलाय देवाय तुभ्यम् हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम Rama Rama Hare Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare.
Jayo Radha Damodar Radha Damodar Radha Damodar Radhe Jayo Yashoda Damodar Yashoda Damodar Yashoda Damodar Yashoda Damodar Jayo Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Radhe Jayo Prabhupada Jayo Prabhupada Jayo Prabhupada Jayo Prabhupada
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Jayo Guru Deva Jayo Guru Deva Jayo Guru Deva Jayo Guru Deva
Jaya Gurudeva, Jaya Gurudeva. Jayo Vishnupad Paramansa Parajika Chasta Tarasatara Shri Shimadis Divine Grace Shri Bhakti Vedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnav Ki Jai Amacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Shri Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktavind Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Sam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Mayapura Dham Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi ki jai, Ganga Maya ki jai, Jamuna Maya ki jai, Samaveda Bhakti Vindi ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi, Davarastakam ki jai, Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the simple devotee, all glories to the simple devotees, all glories to the simple devotee, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga, all glories to His Divine Grace, Sri Bhakti Vedanta Goswami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
नमस्ते नरसिंहाय प्रह्लादलाददायिने हिरण्याकाशिपूर्वक्षः तो नरसिंहो परतो नरसिंहो यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंहो बहिर्नरसिंहो हृदये नरसिंहो तव करकमलवरे नाखा अद्भुतशृङ्गां दलिता हिरण्यकशिपु तनुभृङ्गा केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय नरसिंहदेव 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 जय नरसिंहदेव जय प्रह्लाद महाराज प्रह्लाद महाराज प्रह्लाद महाराज जय प्रह्लाद महाराज जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद नित्य गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल
भगवान की जय। वृंदाये तुलसीदेवाय प्रियाये केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति परिदेवी सत्यव्रताय नमो नमः। वृंदाये तुलसीदेवाय प्रियाये केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति परिदेवी सत्यव्रताय नमो नमः। वृंदाये तुलसीदेवाय प्रियाये केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति परिदेवी सत्यव्रताय नमो नमः। वृंदाये तुलसीदेवी महारानी की जय।
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः।
कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः।
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः। तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः। राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो ये अभिलाषी।
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावा ये अभिलाषी।
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो ये अभिलाषी। नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः।
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः।
जय तुम्हार शरण लोय तारा वांछ पूर्ण होय।
ये तुम्हार शरण लोय तारा वांछ पूर्ण होय।
कृपा करे करो तारे वृंदावन वासी। मोरा ये अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो वास।
मोरा ये अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो वास।
नयन हरिबो सदा जुगल रूप राशि। सदा युगल परासी। निवेदनादारो सकीरणुगाता करो। सकीरणुगाता करो सेवाधिकार दिए करो निज दासी बिना कृष्ण दास कोई ये न मोरा हो श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये न बासी श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये न बासी कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ते प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ते प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ते प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव नित्य गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल
Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Vrindaye Tulsi Devaya Priyaye Keshavasya Cha Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Sachivrata Namo Namaha. Vrindaye Tulsi Devaya Priyaye Keshavasya Cha Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Sachivrata Namo Namaha. Vrindaye Tulsi Devaya Priyaye Keshavasya Cha Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Sachivrata Namo Namaha. Vrindaye Tulsi Devi Maharani Ki Jai. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityamani Namaste Saraswati Devi. Oh, to Krishna, I bow before you again. My desire is to be in the service of Sri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you has his wishes fulfilled. Bestowing your mercy upon him, you make him resident in Vrindavan. My desire is to also grant me residence. The pleasure grows as Sri Vrindavan. Thus,
within my vision, I always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of Kavadyams of the bride. Please give me the privilege to
service and make me your roommate. It's very holy and servant of Krishna. Praise. May
I always sing the love of Shri Radha.
Govinda.
Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrindi Devi ki jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sikh Hastakam ki jai. Chito Dapanamajanam Bhavamada Vagni Vapanam Shri Akari Vachandrika Vitaranam Vidya Badhu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pratiparam Purna Nritasvadanam Sarvatma Kirtanam Nam Namakari Baudha Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatra Pitani Mitashmarane Nakala Itadrishi Tava Kripa Bhavan Mamapi Durdhaiva Midrishamiya Janinanuraga Trinarapi Sanichena Tarorapi Saishana Amani Namanadena Kirtaniya Sadahari Nadhanam Najanam Nasundarim Kavitam Vajagari Sakamahe Mama Janmane Janmaneshwari Bhavata Bhakti Rahituki Tvahi Ainanda Tanuja Kinkaram Patitam Mam Vishame Bhavam Buddho Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja Sitaduli Sadrisham Vichintaya Nayana Mangala Shrudharaya Padanam Gadgadardaya Pulaka Vanama Grahane Bhavishyati Jogaitam Nimeshena Chakshasa Pravashaitam Sunyaitam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Virayame Asli Shubha Padaratam Pinastumam Adarshana Marmahatam Karutuva Jatatatava Viradatulam Pato Matprananatastu Sahivana Para Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishna ki jai. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all detached attachment for years, and extinguishes the fire of conditional life for repeated birth and death. This Sankirtana movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because His presence raises the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we're always anxious. O my Lord, Your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have invested all your transcendental energies. There is not even a hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names. But I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself a Lord on strolling street, one should be more tolerant than the tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your cause that devotes from service, birth, unto birth. O Son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yet somehow or other I am falling in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at the wheel of the speed. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love, flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs of my body stand on the end of that recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering the moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrent rain, and I feel all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and He sure remains so. Even His son doesn't roughly by His embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for He's always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shri Shri Shikastakam Ki Jai. There are 10 offenses in matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1. To blaspheme devotees with dedicated life or propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider names that may God, the Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, to be equal to or independent of the name of the Lord. 3. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic literature or literatures pursuant to the Vedic version. 5. To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation of the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities and strength to chanting the holy name of the Lord. 8. To consider the chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are from the Vedas as fruitive activities, the Karma Kanda. 9. To instruct the frivolous person about the glories of the holy name of the Lord. And 10. To not have complete faith in chanting the holy names and to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions in this matter.
It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be a Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses
in order to quickly achieve the desired success.
Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our most humble obeisance to all Vaishnavas, the Lord. They are just like desire trees that can fulfill the desires of one, and therefore fully compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Vanchakalpatarabhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srimad Bhagavatam, Grantaraja Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaurvani Pucharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Bhaskatya Desatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaurvani Pucharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Bhaskatya Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraja Ki Jai. Canto 2, Chapter 7, verse 52. Yata Haro Bhagavati Rinam Bhaktir Bhavishyati Sarvatmana Kiladare iti sankalpa varnaya. Yata, as much as haro, unto the personality of Godhead. Bhagavati, unto the Lord. Nirinam, for human beings. Bhakti, devotional service. Bhavishyati, become enlightened. Sarva Atmani, the absolute whole. Akila Adare, unto the summum bonum. Iti, thus, sankalpa, sankalpya, by determination. Varnaya, described. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Please describe the science of Godhead with determination and in a manner by which it will be quite possible for the human being to develop transcendental devotional service unto the personality of Godhead, Hari, the supersoul of every living being and the summum bonum source of all energies. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srimad Bhagavatam is the philosophy of devotional service and the scientific presentation of man's relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prior to the age of Kali, there was no need for such a book of knowledge to know the Lord and His potential energies. But with the beginning of the age of Kali, human society gradually became influenced by four sinful principles, namely illegitimate connection with women, intoxication, gambling, and unnecessary killing of animals. Because of these basic sinful acts, man gradually became forgetful of his eternal relation with God. Therefore, man became blind, so to speak, to his ultimate goal of life. The ultimate goal of life is not to pass a life of irresponsibility like the animals and indulge in a polished way in the four animal propensities, namely eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. For such a blind human society, in the darkness of ignorance, Srimad Bhagavatam is the torchlight to see things in proper perspective. Therefore, it was necessary to describe the science of God from the very beginning or from the very birth of the phenomenal world. As we have already explained, Srimad Bhagavatam is so scientifically presented that any sincere student of this great science will be able to understand the science of God simply by reading it with attention or simply by hearing it from the bona fide speaker. Everyone is hankering after happiness in life, but in this age, the members of human society, blind as they are, do not have the proper vision that the personality of Godhead is the reservoir of all happiness because He is the ultimate source of everything. Janmadasayata. Happiness in complete perfection without hindrance can be achieved only by our devotional relationship with Him. And it is only by His association that we can get free of distressful material existence. Even those who are after the enjoyment of this material world can also take shelter of the great science of Srimad Bhagavatam, and they will be successful at the end. Narada is therefore requested or ordered by his spiritual master to present this science with determination and in good plan. Narada was never advised to preach the principles of Bhagavatam to earn a livelihood. He was ordered by his spiritual master to take the matter very seriously in a missionary spirit. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, so we'll go on to the next verse, which is the last verse in this chapter. Mayam varnayato musya Ishwarasyanu maudata Shinvata Shradaya Nityam Maya Yatma Namuyati. Mayam, affairs of the external energy. Varnayata, while describing Amushya, of the Lord, Ishwarasya, of the personality of Godhead, Anumodata, thus appreciating. Shinvata, thus hearing. Shradaya, with devotion. Nityam, regularly. Mayaya, by the illusory energy. Atma, the living entity. Na, never. Muyati, becomes illusions. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The Lord's activities in association with his different energies should be described, appreciated, and heard in accordance with the teachings of the Supreme Lord. If this is done regularly with devotion and respect, one is sure to get out of the illusory energy of the Lord. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The science of learning a subject matter seriously is different from the sentiments of fanatics. Fanatics, or fools, may consider the Lord's activities in relation with the external energy to be useless for them, and they may falsely claim to be higher participants in the internal energy of the Lord, but factually, the Lord's activities in relation with the external energy and the internal energy are equally good. On the other hand, those who are not completely free from the clutches of the Lord's external energy should devoutly hear regularly about the activities of the Lord in relation with the external energy. They should not foolishly jump up to the activities of the internal energy, falsely attracted by the Lord's internal potential activities like his Rasa Lila. The cheap reciters of the Bhagavatam are very much enthusiastic about the Lord's internal potential activities, and the pseudo-devotees absorbed in material sense enjoyment falsely jump to the stage of liberated souls and thus fall down deeply into the clutches of external energy. Some of them think that to hear about the pastimes of the Lord means to hear about his activities with the gopis, or about his pastimes like lifting the Govardhana hill, and they have nothing to do with the Lord's plenary expansions as the Purusha avatars and their pastimes of the creation, maintenance, or annihilation of the material worlds. But a pure devotee knows that there is no difference between the pastimes of the Lord either in Rasa Lila or in creation, maintenance, or destruction of the material world. Rather, the descriptions of such activities of the Lord as the Purusha avatars are specifically meant for persons who are in the clutches of the external energy. Topics like the Rasa Lila are meant for the liberated souls and not for the conditioned souls. The conditioned souls therefore must hear with appreciation and devotion the Lord's pastimes in relationship with the external energy, and such acts are as good as hearing of Rasa Lila in the liberated stage. The conditioned soul should not imitate the activities of liberated souls. Lord Chaitanya never indulged in hearing the Rasa Lila with ordinary men. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Science of God, the first 9 cantos prepare the ground for hearing the 10th canto. This will be further explained in the last chapter of this canto. In the 3rd canto, it will be more explicit. A pure devotee of the Lord, therefore, must begin reading or hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from the very beginning and not from the 10th canto. We have several times been requested by some so-called devotees to take up the 10th canto immediately, but we have refrained from such an action because we wish to present Srimad Bhagavatam as the science of Godhead and not as a sensuous understanding for the conditioned souls. This is forbidden by such authorities as Sri Brahmaji. By reading and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam as a scientific presentation, the conditioned souls will gradually be promoted to the higher status of transcendental knowledge after being freed from the illusory energy based on sense gratification. Thus, the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 2nd canto, 7th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Scheduled Incarnations with Specific Functions. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Premanandi. The Lord's activities in association with his different energies should be described, appreciated, and heard in accordance with the teachings of the Supreme Lord. If this is done regularly with devotion and respect, one is sure to get out of the illusory energy of the Lord. Gaura Premanandi. So here is a non-equivocal explanation of why it's absolutely important to hear Srimad Bhagavatam from the beginning and continuing page by page, verse by verse, on a regular basis, meaning every day, and gradually come up to the end of the 9th canto before jumping to the 10th canto and hearing about Krishna's transcendental pastimes in the spiritual realm. It's absolutely important to do this, and this hearing has to be regulated every day and heard from genuine devotees. Otherwise, there's very little possibility of becoming what you would call not interested at all in sense gratification. Because Prabhupada said this Krishna consciousness movement is all about producing persons of pure character, where they are not at all influenced by the modes of material nature, especially lust and ignorance, because Rajas and Tamas is ruining people's chances of becoming Krishna conscious. But the whole culture today is based on Rajas and Tamas. Just take an example in India, a celebration of Diwali. How do they celebrate it? They have firecrackers, they eat a lot of food, they buy new clothing, and they have parties. Sometimes they're gambling in the party. Sometimes nowadays they drink alcohol. And this is the way they celebrate Diwali. Is that true? So are they remembering Lord Ramachandra? Not that much. Or they just pay lip service. Like one time I was invited to this Indian organization. They were having their annual meeting and an election of officers. And in the beginning, the organizer said, and now let's chant Raghupati Raghav. Does anyone know how to chant it? Nobody stood up. And I was thinking maybe I should do it, but then I said, no, I'm not going to do it because this is ridiculous. You know. So some lady walked up there, and then she started chanting Raghupati Raghav Raja, and then the others so half-heartedly, just followed a little bit, right? But you could tell most of them didn't even know how to chant it. So because they're more interested in politics than in the science of God. The science of God. Why is Prabhupada mentioning this word so many times? The last two purports he's mentioned it many, many times, right? And he mentions it all over the scriptures. And he keeps saying science of Godhead, science of Godhead. Because without, let's get one thing straight. The sages in Naimisharanya, led by Sutta Goswami and Sonaka Rishi, they spent 1,000 years trying to figure out what would be the best way to help the people in Kali Yuga. And their final definite solution was hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, verse by verse, beginning from the beginning and going gradually up to the 9th canto and then into the 10th canto. This was after 1,000 years, this was their conclusion. Now, are we doing it? No, we're not doing it. Even in ISKCON, we don't really seriously do it. Of course, we're supposed to have Bhagavatam class every morning and so-called Bhagavad Gita class at night. And but how many people come to those classes? I don't know about India, but I know about America. Very few people come to the classes. But this was a solution to all the problems in Kali Yuga, and the sages discussed it for 1,000 years, right? And from the end of Dwapara Yuga to 1,000 years into Kali Yuga. So we should take this very seriously, and especially in the first canto, verse number, canto 1, chapter 5, verse number 5. Idam hi pumsas, tapasa sutasya va, svistasya suktasya chabudidatayo, aviyuto rita kabibir nirupito, yad uttama sloka gunanuvarnanam. This is a very, very often quoted verse by Srila Prabhupada. And it says, learned circles have positively concluded that the infallible purpose of the advancement of knowledge, namely austerity, study of the Vedas, sacrifice, chanting of hymns, and charity, culminates in the transcendental descriptions of the Lord, who is defined in choice poetry. This is 1:5:22. This verse has been quoted, and Prabhupada has given lectures on this verse a lot. What is it saying, basically? It's saying that the goal of all of yajna, dana, and tapa, and all the study of the Vedas, and all the chanting of mantras, and performing charity, it should culminate. It should end up. Culminate means Vedanta. The final conclusion of all Vedic knowledge is the transcendental descriptions of the Lord, who is defined in choice poetry. That's what this is. This is all poetry. The whole Bhagavad Gita, the whole Srimad Bhagavatam, this is poetry. Now, but it says the transcendental descriptions of the Lord. So here in this verse today that we read, Prabhupada is very clear. You begin with understanding Krishna's pastimes in the inferior energy, the apara prakriti. And once you finish that through 9 cantos, then you start talking about Krishna's pastimes in the spiritual world, in the para prakriti. So, and this is very important because if we begin to understand a little bit where we are in the material world right now. And how did we get here? We voluntarily walked away from Krishna. People say, "Oh, how did we do that? I don't even remember doing it." But you're doing it every day. So why can't you see what that's the original cause of the fall down? The same thing that we're doing every day is forgetting the Lord. Say, you don't have to say, "I wonder how that happened." No, we can see it every day when we turn our attention away from Krishna to some nonsense. See, and that is why we fell down. Any inattention in the execution of devotional service can lead to a fall down. Any inattention. See? So, like I said, what is binary technology? It's all about taking your mind away from a subject, because 1 0 1 0 1 0 1 0 1 0. That's what happens when you look at a computer or a cell phone or a television. You're being distracted all the time by this thing, that thing, and they make things seem to be very, very, attractive. See? So, and this is all explained by Freud. He's saying that the main inspiration for action in the material world is sex. Well, that's a fact, and they use Freudian philosophy to get people to come to casinos. They use it for helping people choose a candidate that they want to vote for. They definitely use it in all kinds of advertisements, definitely. And in order to entice people, they always have some lady that's dressed up and like looking like a Christmas tree, with all kinds of makeup and all that stuff. And nowadays, the big thing is they get these artificial shots in their butt, so the butt becomes big like this, and a tight dress, and then they have they inflate their breasts, and they try to have a small waist. So all of that is specially planned, and women die getting those shots, and then they have to take away the breast implants because it's ruining their health, right? But see, they purposely do this because this is an idealized object of sense gratification. the big butt and the big breasts and the thin waist. So all this is planned by Maya. So here I'm going to read something that's very interesting. It says in the 13th chapter, 21st verse, nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects, whereas the living entity is the cause of the various sufferings and enjoyments in this world. So this defeats the idea that it's all God's fault. No, we discussed that the other day. If we're suffering, it's because of mistakes that we are making. It's not God has forced us to suffer. And it says here, the different manifestations of body and senses among the living entities are due to material nature. Now, whenever you mention the word material nature, you're talking about Maya Devi or Durga Mata. She's the superintendent of the material world. And she is the shadow of Radharani in a sense, right? But she's not Radharani, but she's the shadow. Just like this world is the shadow reflection and darkness of the spiritual world. It is not the spiritual world, but it's only a shadow reflection of it, you see. So then it says, different manifestations of body and senses among the living entities are due to material nature, or Maya. There are 8,400,000 different species of life, and these varieties are creations of the material nature. In other words, all the bodies, not the soul, but the bodies. Just like we see there's this housing project across the street. What's the name of it across the street? Okay. And then there's another one over here. What's that one called? Red Hawk, right? And there's another one over there. That's like, huh? Okay. Yeah. So in the same, there's so many different neighborhoods. They all have a name, right? Yeah. Right. So there's 8,400,000 species. They all have a name. You see, and someone can afford the Red Hawk. Someone can't afford that. They can afford another one. Someone can still get something in Renton or something on Enumclaw because they can't afford it in Bothell or whatever. This is what is happening. Why do you think there's so many bodies, so many species? It all corresponds to the way people have a taste for sense gratification. You know, just like one time we were with Prabhupada in Paris, and we went to the Eiffel Tower, and Prabhupada looked up and I said, "What is up there?" And someone said, "Oh, Prabhupada, it's a restaurant." I said, "Huh, a restaurant? They want to eat like the birds up in the air." The way Prabhupada would see things is just amazing, right? So, and of course, you go to the Seattle Center and you see the what's that called? Yeah, the Space Needle. What does this have on the top? A revolving restaurant. So people go up there, you know, they get dizzy and they're going around like this all the time, and they want to eat up in the sky like a bird, right? So you can see why there are so many species, because there's unlimited number of ways people want to have sense gratification. They want to have it underneath the water. They want to have it on the surface of the water. They want to have it on land. They want to have it up in the trees. They want to have it up in the sky. And now Bezos wants you to have it in outer space. So he's opening the first spa on a space satellite, you know, that he's building. And he's advertising it already. He hasn't done it, but he's advertising it already. Like I'm not going to explain it again, but you remember what I explained. So you see how there are infinite varieties of ways people want to have sense gratification. That's why there's 8,400,000 species, and all of them are different types of bodies for sense gratification. You know, you want to eat crap, you take birds as a fish, and people say, "Oh, fish is good, healthy." It's not. Fish is a water filter. It filters all the crap in the rivers and the ocean. So when you eat a fish, you're eating all the crap that the fish ate. See? It's the complete opposite of what people are saying it is, you see. So everyone is confused. That's why Prabhupada said in this purport, and it's very important, he says the science the science of learning a subject matter seriously is different from the sentiments of fanatics. Now, who is he referring to? You don't understand till you go down a couple of lines. He's referring to those devotees who want to jump to the 10th canto right away. Now, there was a group like that in ISKCON in Los Angeles. They were called the Gopi Baba Club. They were a group of devotees that would meet, men and women, and they would read the 10th canto only. See? So when Prabhupada heard about this, he was shocked, and he called the leader. I know who the leader is. I'm going to mention his name because people should know the names of rascals. And he said, "Why are you doing this?" He said, "Well, Prabhupada, you say in the Krishna book that if someone reads the pastimes of Krishna with the gopis, they'll become free of sex desire." He said, "That is not true in your case." He said, "You must stop this immediately. I don't want this anymore. This is sahaja nonsense." He said, "You read first 9 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam." So he said, "Why do you think there are 9 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam before you come to the 10th canto?" Right? And now we're seeing what Prabhupada says here. He says, "Fanatics or fools may consider the Lord's activities in relation with the external energy to be useless for them, and they may falsely claim to be higher participants in the internal energy of the Lord, but factually the Lord's activities in relation with the external energy and the internal energy are equally good. On the other hand, those who are not completely free from the clutches of the Lord's external energy should devoutly," notice the word devoutly, that means spiritually focused, right? Devoutly hear regularly about the activities of the Lord in relation with the external energy. That's what we're doing. We finished the first canto, we're in the second canto, and we might very well just begin the first canto again because there's so much information here that you realize, well, I read it all, I heard it, I still can't remember any of it, There's so many fine points being made. They should not foolishly jump up to the activities of the internal energy, falsely attracted by the Lord's internal potential activities like his Rasa Lila. There it is, right there. So the fanatics are the people that jump to the 10th canto. So then you have all this whole group of people, like they are the pundits that speak almost uniquely about the 10th canto. Huh?
They say Rasa Pancha Adhyaya.
Oh, is that what they say? What does it mean?
Rasa Pancha Adhyaya.
Okay, 5 types of ignorance. Oh yeah, 5 chapters of Rasa Lila. Yeah, so they're experts at it, and they're usually Hindi speaking, and they give these. People go there to get their senses titillated by hearing about Krishna's so-called sexual activities. It's nonsense. See, and all these things go on in India. India is the source. India is like a gigantic wok or a cooking pot, and they're making a gigantic khichdi, right? The whole country is like involved in khichdi making, just taking this, that, and deforming everything. So therefore, it says here, there are 8,400,000 different species of life, and these varieties are creations of the material nature. They arise from the different sensual pleasures of the living entity, who thus desires to live in this body or that body. When he is put into different bodies, he enjoys different kinds of happiness and distress. His material happiness and distress are due to his body, and not to himself as he is. In his original state, there is no doubt of enjoyment. Therefore, that is his real state. Because of the desire to lord it over material nature, he is in the material world. In the spiritual world, there is no such thing. The spiritual world is pure. But in the material world, everyone is struggling hard to acquire different kinds of pleasures for the body. It might be more clear to state that this body is the effect of the senses. The senses are instruments for gratifying desire. Now, the sum total, the body and instrument senses, are offered by material nature, and as will be clear in the next verse, the living entity is blessed or damned with circumstances according to his past desire and activity. According to one's desires and activities, material nature places one in various residential quarters, meaning bodies. The being himself is the cause of his attaining such residential quarters and his attendant enjoyment or suffering. Once placed in some particular kind of body, he comes under the control of nature, meaning Maya, because the body, being matter, acts according to the laws of nature. At that time, the living entity has no power to change that law. Suppose an entity is put into the body of a dog. As soon as he is put into the body of the dog, he must act like a dog. He cannot act otherwise. And if the living entity is put into the body of a hog, then he is forced to eat stool and act like a hog. Similarly, if the living entity is put into the body of a demigod, he must act according to his body. This is the law of nature. But in all circumstances, the supersoul is with the individual soul. That is explained in the Vedas, Mundaka Upanishad 3.1.1, as follows: Dwa Suparna Sayuja Sakaya. The Supreme Lord is so kind upon the living entity that he always accompanies the individual soul and in all circumstances is present as the supersoul or Paramatma. Well, this is explaining why there are so many different bodies. It's all based on the desire and activity of the living entity in the previous life. And then they get a body that's suitable or commensurate to their desire and also their karma. Unfulfilled desires and their karma. So therefore, it's very important that right from birth, a child should be trained in Krishna consciousness, because otherwise they will not have a defense mechanism or knowledge by which to differentiate between what is Krishna consciousness and what is not Krishna consciousness. Now, if you don't train your kids right from the beginning of their life in Krishna consciousness, then they're unarmed. They're walking into a war zone without any protective armor or any weapon to protect themselves. And they're going to be shot down very easily. Shot down doesn't mean they physically die, but spiritually they die, because of all the misinformation that they're taught for 8 hours a day or 6 hours a day in schools. And because the whole culture is based on producing sense gratifiers. Sense gratifiers buy products, and they buy products that they don't need, but they think they need it for sense gratification. And that's what's happening today. See, why do you think there's so many factories in the world? And by the way, factories, what do? They poison the environment, right? Like, look at India. You can't even swim in a river now in India. They're all contaminated. Why? Because they're just dumping all, not only the sewage, but they're dumping all the toxic materials and chemicals from the factories into the river, because it's cheaper to do that than to recycle it. And you have to pay for that to be recycled, right? So, I mean, you have in China and India, you have environmental catastrophe, because they're producing, but especially China is producing products for the whole world. Every country is buying junk from China, right? And the people are working, and they're not really being paid enough, but they're working very hard, and they're producing all these junk products, you know. So therefore, unless we understand why we're in the material world and how we can get out, we are in ignorance. And our whole life will be spent in ignorance, and we'll take birth again. And no telling what the next birth is going to be. It's based on our desire and activity in this life. So the next verse says, Purusha Prakriti Stohi. Bhukte prakriti jan gunai karanam gunasangasya sadasad yoni janmasu. The living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus he meets with good and evil among various species. So this is a very important verse if you want to understand Krishna consciousness. Yeah.
Prabhupada actually is one of his last purport to Bhagavatam. He was almost leaving the world.
Speaking in the microphone.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. So this verse, Prabhupada, one of his last purports to Bhagavatam, when he is about to leave the body, that video they record, he quotes this verse.
Wow.
And then he gives Karanam Guna Sangasya, association. So devotees should always associate with Sattva Guna.
With?
Sattva Guna.
Sattva
They should position themselves.
They should associate with persons who are in the mode of goodness.
Born of goodness,
and hopefully transcendental goodness. Yeah.
So he says, like, because of the association only this is going on.
Yeah.
Bad association.
Yes, exactly. And here Prabhupada says, this verse is very important for an understanding of how the living entities transmigrate from one body to another. It is explained in the second chapter that the living entity is transmigrating from one body to another just as one changes dress. This change of dress is due to his attachment to material existence. Well, how do you get attached to material existence? You just go on the internet, you just go on the cell phone, you just read books, you go to school, and you'll be attached to material existence. That's what they teach. That's all pervasive in this culture, right? And it's not only in the United States, it's everywhere. It's in India now, it's in China, it's in, it'll be on the moon when SpaceX gets there, and it'll be on Mars also when SpaceX gets there. So you see, this is the whole theme of material life and material education. As long as he is captivated by this false manifestation, he has to continue transmigrating from one body to another. Due to his desire to lord it over material nature, he is put into such undesirable circumstances. Under the influence of material desire, the entity is born sometimes as a demigod, sometimes as a man, sometimes as a beast, as a bird, as a worm, as an aquatic, as a saintly man, as a bug. This is going on. And in all cases, the living entity thinks himself to be the master of his circumstances, and yet he is under the influence of material nature, meaning Maya. How he is put into such different bodies is explained here. It is due to association with the different modes of nature. One has to rise, therefore, above the three material modes and become situated in the transcendental position. That is called Krishna consciousness. Mamchayo vicharina bhakti yogena sevate sagunam samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. That's a very important verse in 14th chapter, verse number 26, which says that one who always engages in Krishna consciousness and never falls down under any circumstance at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman or to the spiritual level. Okay, so this is what is being said here also. He says, the change can be expected only by hearing from authoritative sources. The best example is here. Arjuna is hearing the science of God. Notice he says science of God from Krishna. This living entity, if he submits to this hearing process, will lose his long-cherished desire to dominate material nature. And gradually and proportionately, as he reduces his long desire to dominate, he comes to enjoy spiritual happiness. So many kids say, I don't want to go to the temple, it's boring. I want to stay home and play on my computer or my Xbox. And I want to go on the social media and talk to my friends. That's not boring. But going to the temple, that's boring. You see. Now, why is going to the temple boring? Because they're affected very seriously by Maya. They're in a state of illusion, right? Maya has attracted them with nonsense. So nonsense makes more than real sense because their desires have become perverted. See? Just like smoking a cigarette. See? The first time a child smokes a cigarette, they start coughing, their face gets red, they want to throw up, right? But then they keep trying because it's cool to do it. Because they want to integrate into the group, become a groupie. So they force themselves to learn how to smoke, even though it's horrible. And then all of a sudden they become expert. They're inhaling and holding it in the lungs, so the cancer develops more quickly, right? And then they blow it out, you know, and as if they've committed some great act, right? So it's very cool. One time I had a friend in France, and he was married, and his wife was always cheating on him, even in their own house. So her lovers would come, and in their own bed, they would engage in nonsense. So one time, he he came home early, and for some reason or other, he wasn't able to get inside the door, right? So he had some suspicion. So somehow or other, he climbed up to the second floor and looked into the bedroom window, and there he saw his wife with another man. So he didn't reject his wife. He just accepted, for some reason or other. He was really upset, but he couldn't do anything because she refused to change, and it caused a lot of suffering for him. So one day I said to him, how did you marry such a terrible person? He said, oh, well, one day I went to this bar, and a nightclub, and she was sitting on a stool with one leg over the other, and she had a cigarette holding on the side of her mouth, and it was dangling down, and smoke was coming up, and her head was like this a little bit, and the smoke was going into her eye, and she was sort of closing her eye and opening it, and it reminded me of my grandmom, who used to sit like that and smoke in the kitchen. I'm not making this up. This is a true story. He said, and I remember my grandmom. That's why I wanted to marry her. That shows you how stupid people are, right? And now, the rest of his life, he suffered. Then his wife committed suicide, right? What did he do? He married his wife's sister. So, you see how crazy people are. This is association with the modes of nature that makes people crazy. And they have all kinds of crazy inspirations, and all based on sense gratification. So here it says, the best example is here. Arjuna is hearing the science of God from Krishna. The living entity, if he submits to this hearing process, will lose his long-cherished desire to dominate material nature. And gradually and proportionally, as he reduces his long desire to dominate, he comes to enjoy spiritual happiness. In a Vedic mantra, it is said that as he becomes learned in association with the Supreme Personality Godhead, he proportionately relishes his eternal blissful life. His eternal blissful life. In other words, the soul is eternal, and the nature of the soul is to be happy, right? To be blissful. But are people happy? Are they blissful? No. When they have intense sense gratification, they think they're happy and blissful, but it just leads to more misery. So then in this purport, 1.5.22, Prabhupada says, the perfection of life culminates in the realization of the Supreme Being, Vishnu. The Shruti, therefore, or the Vedic scriptures, therefore, directs that those who are actually advanced in learning should aspire for the service of Lord Vishnu. Ultimately, persons who are enamored by the external beauty of Vishnu Maya do not understand the culmination or perfection or self-realization, do not understand that culmination of perfection or self-realization depends on Vishnu. Vishnu Maya means sense enjoyment, which is transient and miserable. Those who are entrapped by Vishnu Maya utilize advancement of knowledge for sense enjoyment. So why is he saying Vishnu Maya here and not saying Maya? So ask that question. What do you think?
Vishnu's concept Rama Devi.
What?
Vishnu's concept Rama Devi,
Yeah,
and actually Maya is shadow of Rama Devi.
maybe. Let's read one. Vishnu Maya means sense enjoyment, which is transient and miserable. Those who are entrapped by Vishnu Maya utilize advancement of knowledge for sense enjoyment. Sri Narada Muni has explained that all paraphernalia of the cosmic universe is but an emanation from the Lord out of his different energies, because the Lord has set in motion by his inconceivable energy the actions and reactions of the created manifestation. They have come to be out of his energy. They rest on his energy, and after annihilation they merge into him. Nothing is therefore different from him, but at the same time, the Lord is always different from them. When advancement of knowledge is applied in the service of the Lord, the whole process becomes absolute. The personality of Godhead and his transcendental name, fame, glory, etc., are all non-different from him. Therefore, all the sages and devotees of the Lord have recommended that the subject matter of art, science, philosophy, physics, chemistry, psychology, and all other branches of knowledge should be wholly and solely applied in the service of the Lord. That was the culture of India before. Bharatanatyam, architecture, mathematics, go down the line. Everything was based on pleasing the Lord before. And now they've eliminated that. So now they build cricket stadiums, big ones, right, for thousands and thousands, you know. They build movie houses. They build all these buildings for sense gratification, right? And they build slaughterhouses that are very big, huh?
Big factories.
Big, gigantic factories. Factories are gigantic, bigger than temples. Right.
It's Rascal Nehru, Guruji.
Yeah.
And he came to South India.
Nehru, when he came to South India, when he saw the Srirangam temple complex, it's one of the largest, right?
Yeah, it's
Then he
160
said,
acres.
we should convert all this into factory.
Yes. Why are we wasting this land?
He said that.
Yeah.
Rascal.
It's nonsense. He ruined the whole country. The fiction writers, poets, and celebrated literateurs are generally engaged in writing of sensuous subjects. But if they turn towards the service of the Lord, they can describe the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. Valmiki was a great poet, and similarly, Vyasadeva is a great writer. And both of them have absolutely engaged themselves in delineating the transcendental activities of the Lord, and by doing so have become immortal. Similarly, science and philosophy also should be applied in the service of the Lord. There is no use presenting dry, speculative theories for sense gratification. Philosophy and science should be engaged to establish the glory of the Lord. Advanced people are eager to understand the absolute truth through the medium of science, and therefore a great scientist should endeavor to prove the existence of the Lord in a scientific basis. This verse is the basis why Prabhupada started the Bhaktivedanta Institute, right? And he put my good friend Bhakti Swarup Damodar as the president of that institute, right? And he was very happy about that book. Yeah. So it says, philosophy and science should be engaged to establish the glory of the Lord. Advanced people are eager to understand the absolute truth through the medium of science. By the way, Prabhupada said it's not necessary to do any seminal research. All the research has already been done. It's called the Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. You don't have to research anything. What is necessary is to interpret the research of the scientists correctly. They're interpreting it incorrectly. We have to interpret it correctly. Yeah, you're connected to Krishna because everything comes from Krishna. Krishna is the unified field theory. What Einstein was not able to complete. and they still haven't completed. They can't complete it without Krishna. So the science of Krishna is the real science. And we've said that the real definition of science is not the one they give in the dictionary. Look it up right now. The real definition of science is what is true in all frames of reference and in all time. That is real science, and that is only Krishna. What do they say? It's a definition that falls short of the real meaning of science.
The intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment.
Okay, so right there they have diverted, because the entire material creation is only 1/4 of the of God's not creation, but God's world.
This is a shadow.
And it's a perverted reflection of it, of the spiritual world. So therefore, right there, they reveal their hand. Any theory that they come up with is going to be incomplete, because 3/4 of reality is ignored. You see? So all their theories are changing all the time, whereas science means something that's not changing and is true in all frames of reference and for all eternity, for all time. So the scientists' theories are changing all the time, right? Because they never hit the nail on the head. They always come up with something like even Newton's 3 laws of motion. They do not hold when you get down to microscopic particles at the speed of light. They have to have another theory for that.
That's why they're trying to come up with the unified.
Well, Einstein tried, he failed, right?
Prabhupada actually gives.
But actually, Einstein was not that smart. I can prove it. But go ahead.
Prabhupada actually talks about this unified field theory. Gives the hint in the 3rd canto, 26th chapter, 34th verse.
Yeah, that 26th chapter is chock full of
Fundamental
science.
principle of material nature.
Yeah.
And he says, I'll just read this. It's very, very, very amazing.
I will show you in the next couple of days how foolish Einstein was and silly. Right. So he came up with some good realizations of matter, but outside of that, he was very foolish and childish, not really that smart. Go ahead.
It says,
So just because he's a great mathematician and he has conceptualization of matter way ahead of many people, actually, but he was working on the basis of the work done by Maxwell and other scientists, but he interpreted what they found in a more, let's say, comprehensive way. His interpretation of what Maxwell and other mathematicians and scientists did was better than what they understood, what they found.
correct.
Right? So he was given a lot more credit. But the real guy was Gödel, that most people don't talk about. Gödel was a mathematician also, and he was Einstein. But he's not given any credit. You know why? Because he mathematically proved that God exists. And because he did that, they looked down on, but his work was not published while he was living, because he was afraid that they would ostracize him from Princeton and from academia. So it came out posthumously after he died. And then all his own students who he trained, they all jumped on him and tried to prove that his mathematical proof of the existence of God was not correct. So you see how vicious they are. Go ahead.
And this is 3rd chapter, the 3rd canto, 26th chapter, 34th verse. Bhutanam chitra datritvam bahirantaram evacha pranendriyatma dishnyatvam nabaso vritti lakshanam. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The activities and characteristics of the ethereal element can be observed as accommodation for the room for external and internal existence of all living entities, namely the field of activities of the vital air, the senses, and the mind. Purport: the mind, the senses, and the vital force or living entity have forms, although they are not visible to the naked eye. Form rests.
Not visible what? To the naked
Eye, yeah. Form rests in subtle existence in the sky, and internally it is perceived as the veins within the body and the circulation of the vital air. Externally, there are invisible forms of sense objects. The production of the invisible sense objects is the external activity of the ethereal element.
That's why we say the brain is not the mind.
And the circulation of vital air and blood is its internal activity. That subtle form exists in the ether has been proved by modern science by transmission of television, by which forms or photographs of one place are transmitted to another place by the action of ethereal element. That is very nicely explained here. So now is the important part, Project comes. This verse is the potential basis of great scientific research work, for it explains how subtle forms are generated from the ethereal element, what their characteristics and actions are, and how the tangible elements, namely the air, fire, water, and earth, are manifested from the subtle form. Mental activities or psychological actions of thinking, feeling, and willing are also activities on the platform of ethereal existence. The statement in Bhagavad Gita that the mental situation at the time of death is the basis of the next birth is also corroborated in this verse. Mental existence transforms into tangible form as soon as there is an opportunity due to contamination or development of the gross elements from subtle form. That sentence proposes like this verse is the potential basis of great scientific research work.
So why don't you become a scientist now?
I'm just trying for it.
You could become the most famous person in the world if you prove what's said in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, that the moon is much bigger than the sun and much farther away than the sun. You just proved that. It's just like who became famous? Galileo and Ptolemy and all these people, Copernicus, because they proved that they proved that the heliocentric theory of the Catholic Church was wrong. That the sun does not circle the earth circles the sun. And they both became very, very famous, right? So all you do is just take one thing from the Bhagavatam, that the moon is much farther away than the sun and much bigger than the sun, and you would become the most famous scientist. Or you could find how to produce blood. They've never found how to produce blood. You prefer produce it in your body, I produce it in my body, but they have never been able to produce blood. You would become the most famous scientist and probably the richest man in the world if you could figure out these things, right? Or this, where you have electromagnetic waves carrying forms and sound and so many things. So you keep experimenting with that, you'll be able to be able to do what they did in Kurukshetra battle, infuse an arrow with atomic power. With a mantra. So this mantra science is the most powerful thing because it controls the subtle energies in the universe. Right? Anyway, there's a lot of ways that you could become very famous and very rich if you read the Bhagavatam and just do any one of those things. You would become the most famous scientist, much greater than Einstein. Yeah. All right, we'll stop right there. We'll continue tomorrow. I didn't finish either, so this is a big subject. Hare Krishna. You want to lead? No.
जयो प्रभुपदा जयो प्रभुपदा जयो प्रभुपदा जयो प्रभुपदा
Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhagati Sadma
Kevala Bhakti Sadma
Bandha Mohi Savadhana Mate
Bandho Mui Savadhana Mate
Jahara Prasade Bhai He Bhava Turiya Jai
Janara Prasade Bhai He Baladuriya Jai
Krishna Prapti O Jaha Hoite
Krishna Prabhi Hoya Hoide
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Koriya Kya
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Goriya Kya
Harana Kori Ho Mane Asha
Mane Asa
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Utama Gati
Guru Charane Rati Veshe Utama Gati
Jai Prasad Pure Sarva Asha
Ye Prasade Pure Savasa
Chakshudan Dilo Jai Janme Janme Prabhu Se
Chakshudan Dila Jai Janme Janme Prabhu Se
Divya Gyan Hriday Prakashito
Divya Gyan De Prakashito
Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite Avidya Vinasha Jaite
Bhakti Avidya Vinasha Jate
Vede Gai Jahara Charito
Vedekaya Janara Charito
Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adama Janara Bandhu
Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu
Lokena Lokera Jivana Aha Prabhu Karo Daya Deho More Pad Chaya
Prabhu Pura Jaya Deya Mere Pada Chaya
Ebe Jaz Gushak Tribhuana
Ebe Askusaki Bhuvana
Jayo Prabhupada Jayo Prabhupada Jayo Prabhupada Jayo Prabhupada
Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada
Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine
Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namane
Namaste सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी भाषता देशधारिणे
नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी भाषता देशधारिणे
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंदा श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवासुदेव गौर भक्तवृंद
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Nitya Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitya Gaura Hari Bol
Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Pararajika Shasta Tarasatara Shri Shrimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Kuti Vaishnava Vindi Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Shakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Bhaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Mayapura Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Ganga Maya Ki Jai Jamuna Maya Ki Jai Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the Son, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavani Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Kudaya Krishna Vistaya Kutin The lotus feet of our spiritual master is the only way by which we can attain pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna.
My only wish to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is the Lord without birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates. By him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master of the devotees. Master, be merciful unto me. Give me the shade of your lotus feet. Your flame is spread all over